Grace and peace be multiplied unto you. Thank you for those of you who are making preparation or who are already logged in for our Walking Through the Word Wednesday night Bible class. Thank you for those who are sharing with us in person as well. Thank you for being a part of our Walking Through the Word experience. Grace and peace be multiplied unto you. Thank you again to our intercessors, and thank you for your diligence. Thank you for your prayers on our behalf. Tonight, we certainly appreciate our intercessors for laboring week in and week out. Thank you, Sister Johnson. Thank you, Sister Porter, and thank you, Reverend Young. We certainly appreciate each of you, and we appreciate what you are doing on our behalf and keeping us lifted in prayer. Thank you for being with us tonight. I want to, as we are facing the back and the front of the coming new year, I want to tonight begin to look at, I started on Sunday, as I talked about just the value of humanity and the value of the family dynamic, and how significant and how important that is, and how important that is. I want to continue in that particular thought as they are preparing to get me some new batteries for the mic, and then bring me a different mic is what they are working on at this point as we are preparing for this experience. I want to thank you so much. God bless you. They're coming. Just bear with us. Thank you. Thank you. Again, I want to begin this series on looking at the family and what is a theological foundation that we can begin to build as it relates to the family dynamic, and what does that look like? Or is there biblical? Can we take a biblical approach as it relates to family, and what the value of that family system? And so I want to start looking at that, and I don't want to be in a hurry to do so, as I want to just kind of make sure that we're all progressing together as it relates to family, and what does that look like? Do we have what we need as it relates to succeeding within the family dynamic? And if you're like me, you've got some work to do. If you're like me, you got some work to do. But you got to make up in your mind that you want to do the work, that you want to do the work. You want to do the work. And so as I was, just kind of pondering, and bear with me as I try to, again, not get in a hurry, because I think if we can restore, continue to build or strengthen the family dynamic and the family system, I think therein lies an answer to a lot of our other issues. I think we have, and I shouldn't say as if that's all inclusive. I think there hasn't been enough focus, is what I should say, on the family. I think even in churches, we have not. There go we again. There has not been enough. Have we taught enough concerning the family dynamic. When you think about the common denominator that most individuals can have in life, if all of us, is that all of us came from somewhere. Does that make sense? We all came from somewhere. You didn't just show up. Like, don't let nobody tell you you just kind of showed up. You didn't. You came from somewhere. And the reality is you came from a family. Whether you have a mother, you have a father. Some of us have siblings, right? And so when you think about what our community faces, when you think about gun violence, for an example, right? And you think about the victim of gun violence, and then you think about those who unfortunately make the decision to use weapons and gun violence. If you think about the common denominator, whether they are the person who was the perpetrator or the person who's the victim, all of them, or both of them, came from a family dynamic. Does that make sense? That's where they came from. And I think society is comfortable when families are disrupted. Society is comfortable when families are disrupted. Well, why do you make such a statement, Pastor Johnson? Because there's always a piece of capitalism. And society looks at capitalism. How do we benefit from dysfunction, right? And so if we strengthen the family system, then instead of us needing money to bail our children out, right? We spend more time teaching them and them learning. And so what happens is they make a decision because they figure they're going to come from this dysfunction, and all of a sudden they're going to make bad decisions. So what do? They build better prisons, right? They build better prisons, and instead of us having our children interact with professors, unfortunately they interact with police, right? And so the disruption of the family system, again, because everybody's going to come from a family system. When kids go to school, right, they are leaving a home. Is that right? They're leaving a home in most cases, unless they are displaced. They are leaving a home. And when they leave that home, they are who they are in the classroom, not based upon the classroom, but based upon where they just left at home, right? And so what we do, and we get, not we, but a lot of times what happens is there is so much strain, and I'm not saying the educational system is healthy, because it's not in a lot of instances, but there's a lot of strain because we are sending kids from the home at a system that was broken, and we're telling them to go to school and be fixed. And it doesn't make any sense, right? And so the school and the education system can't fix them because we haven't done, or individuals haven't done what they need to do where? At home, right? And so capitalism comes into play, right? Society is concerned about how do we profit from what's dysfunctional. How do we profit from that? And so they're not concerned with family systems being strengthened, because once you strengthen the family system, there is less reliance upon other individuals and upon other systems, right? Because the family system is so strong. And so the challenge we have is how can we build this theological argument and really look at some biblical basis as it relates to family. How should we go about our relationships? What should our focus be as it relates to our relationship? In other words, how in the heck do we sustain our relationships and how do we get along? Right? How does the family sustain and how do we get along? And so as I begin to look at this and have a great concern for this, I start challenging myself as a pastor and a leader, because we have families and we see kids who are, since Pastor and I are talking in the office tonight, we see kids who are in trouble, right? I'm talking about at an early age, right? And we see the warning signs, yet what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Right? And so that becomes a question. And I thought it was interesting as I begin to journey through the biblical record again, as I do every year. I make it a habit. I try to read Genesis to Revelation every year. I didn't say I study it. I said I did what? I just kind of read the entire Bible. If that's not a practice that you have, then I would encourage you just to do it. Every year, just Genesis to Revelation. Just read. I didn't say pause and take notes. Just read, right? And so it's a habit I have. Every year I read Genesis to Revelation. So if anybody asks me, Pastor Johnson, have you ever read the whole Bible? Yes. Ask me how many times, right? Every year it's just a habit. And so as I begin to pause and I go back and to reflect upon what I've read and to look at it and to say, man, we have missed so many critical things in our churches, right? We've become comfortable with the norm, with what's comfortable, and we got to start stretching ourselves. We have to start stretching ourselves, because there is a society that is prone and ready to challenge everything we do. Everything we do, right? And the family dynamic is critical, because what are we teaching our kids? What do they know? Do they see us bickering, arguing, right? Do they see us disconnected, right? It's interesting because Sunday I was having just my Gemini moment. I'm a Gemini. God knows I am to my heart. I'm a Gemini. I'm praying about that because I need to get better with that. Don't judge me because you got your ways too. So I'm just being transparent. But I know people are like, what do you mean? No, I'm a Gemini. I am. And so I was having one of my Gemini moments, and when I had those moments, I was just quiet, right? I was quiet. I wasn't saying much. I was just in my mode, just quiet. And so my baby girl, Kendi, comes and said, Dad, what's going on? Everything good? I said, what do you mean? She said, first thing she says, right? Because she knows me and her mom, right? This is the relationship of the house. That's the first thing she wanted to know. She said, y'all good? I was like, dang, how you know I ain't mad with you? You understand what I'm saying? Because you get on my nerves. So how you know, and I'm saying, I ain't say that to her, but in my mind I was saying, like, how you know it ain't me and you? Why she talking about? She pointed, my mom was in the kitchen doing whatever, preparing, and she said, y'all good? I'm like, all right. How you know I ain't upset with you about something, but think about it. She went right to where everything starts. She went to right where everything starts, because she understands this relationship, right, kind of dictates what happens at the house, right? And so she wanted to know. And so later on, I was like, well, what made you ask? Was me and your mom okay? Yeah, because I've seen you get quiet when you guys are not. Oh, okay. And so to her, what she's seen in the past, when me and mom are not on the same page, she's seen dad shut down, right? So automatically when dad shuts down, even if it doesn't have anything to do with mom, guess what? That's what she's seen. So that became my responsibility, right, to correct. Well, hold on, Kendi. Dad was quiet because dad was just in one of his self-absorbing modes, and I have an issue with nobody in the house, right? And so are we having those truthful conversations? Are we having those? And so that becomes a challenge. And so I thought it was befitting. And I said all of that because I'm trying to just lead into this. Those of you who are watching virtually, I want to encourage you, you should come and hang out for this series. It's going to be absolutely phenomenal with what God has given us. I'm telling you, you don't want to miss it. You don't want to get behind on this one. And so when I started looking at, I said, okay, because I'm a God believer, right? I'm a God believer. How does God sustain and start his relationships with humanity? I need you to write that. You should write that and make that as a note to yourself. Type it in your phone. How does God initiate and sustain his relationships with humans? Where does it start with him? Where does it start? When does he establish it? How does he determine that he's going to be in relationship with humanity? What do we need to look at? What's a focal point from a theological standpoint that we can perhaps glean from and say, oh, okay, maybe here's what we need to fix, right? What did God do? And so I want to look at Genesis chapter 6, verse number 18. And then, as I'm looking at Genesis chapter 6, verse number 18, I need y'all to be with me. I need one person, not everybody, I need one person to pull up Genesis chapter 9 through 10. My second person, I need you to look at Genesis chapter 17, 1 and 2. So I'm going to look at, Pastor Johnson has Genesis chapter 6, verse number 18. I need one individual to get Genesis chapter 9 through 10, and then I need a second person to get Genesis chapter 17, 1 and 2. All right, who's got Genesis 9 through 10? Want to get ready? So Spinks has it. Who has 17, 1 and 2? Right, Deacon Brown has it. All right, so let's look at something in Genesis chapter 6, verse number 18. Look at what the text says. Genesis chapter 6, verse number 18. God says, but with thee I will establish my covenant, and thou shalt come into the ark, thou and thy sons and thy wife and thy sons' wives with thee. Right? That's Genesis chapter 6, verse number what? 18. Look what he says. But with thee I will establish my what? What's the key word? Covenant. In other words, relationship, right? A commitment without choice, right? And also a commitment without requirement. Look what happens. As he established, he says, but with thee I will establish my what? Covenant. He says to Noah, with you I'll establish my covenant. He says, nothing is forcing me to do this. He says, as a matter of fact, you ain't got a choice in the matter. Right? Right now, what God is saying to Noah is what I'm establishing with you is a unilateral relationship. Unilateral relationship, not bilateral relationship, unilateral relationship. This is what this means. Davion has a baby, right? Davion and Sharika, right, love this baby, right? Right? Is that safe to say? Y'all love the baby? Okay, right? They love the baby, right? This is a unilateral relationship. They love the baby. The baby is not at a place where the baby knows how to love them back. Are you with me? The baby is not at a place yet where the baby understands, I know how to love you back. And so right now, it's a unilateral relationship, and what's happening is they're just loving their baby, right? And they made this, and sometimes even as parents, it ain't even a choice. Because they're yours, right? You just what? Just love them. Isn't that amazing? And so it's a unilateral relationship. And so the more that they love the baby, guess what happens? Growth happens. I need you to note that because we're going to look at kind of a circle of what this family dynamic has to be and what this environment has to be. And one of the key words that we got to look at is growth, right? The more they love the baby, guess what happens? Growth happens. And guess what? By the time the baby gets of age, because they've loved the baby responds with what the baby has received. So growth takes place, right? So when God establishes his relationship with Noah, he says, I am going to make my covenant with you. This unilateral. I'm going to make my covenant with you. I'm going to build relationship with you, not based upon your choice. Not based upon your choice. I've made a decision that I'm going to build a relationship with you. Guess what? That's my choice. And I didn't ask you, could I? You got me? I didn't ask you, hey, Sister Rogers, can I build a relationship with you? That's not what he did. Hey, Deacon Brown, can I build a relationship with you? Nope. He says, I am going to establish. In other words, I'm going to start it, and I'm going to let this relationship grow to a place based upon what I start. And so the relationship is going to mature, and growth is going to take place. Why? Because I've made a choice, and guess what? Covenant, while it's a commitment, it's not a commitment based upon what you do. That's a contract. And I think in modern day times, we've tried to make or dumb down to the point, especially in theology, to make covenant a contract, and it's not. Because a contract says, if you don't live up to this, then I'm not doing this. And God doesn't operate, neither does he establish his relationships that way. He says, I'm committed to you. You don't have a choice. I'm already committed. I'm in this relationship with you. That's what he says. In Genesis chapter 6, verse number 18, he says, but with thee, I will establish my what? And check this out. Here is how I know. How do you know, Pastor Johnson, that it's covenant without having some level of criteria? Because read the text. He says, and thou shalt come into the ark, thou and thy sons and thy wife and the sons' wives with thee. The whole family. I'm going to enter into this with the whole family. I ain't called them. I ain't talked to them. The only person I talk to is you. So you cannot put criteria on people that you haven't even discussed it with. He said, just what? Bring them. And not only when you study Genesis and Noah, not only is it limited to humans, but it was also non-humans. You got me? He says this is how relationships and family dynamic has to operate. It has to operate with somebody saying, I have made a choice that I am going to have covenant with you. And whether or not you are going to meet up to the criteria, meet up to this level, guess what? That doesn't matter to me. Because I've made the choice that our family is going to have covenant relationship. This is how God does it. Who has Genesis 9 through 10? Read it for us. Let's see if we can find something else.
And I, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you.
Look at that. Look at that. In Genesis chapter 6, verse 18, what does he say he's going to do? I will what? I establish what?
My covenant.
Covenant. We get to Genesis chapter 9. He reestablishes what he's already established to make sure that you understand that covenant is not only for your benefit, but guess what? It's your seed. Does that make sense? So Genesis chapter 9 through 10, I would establish my covenant with you, my relationship with you, but also I'm also establishing my relationship with your family. Does that make sense? All right. Who has Genesis 17, what's it, 1 through 2? All right, Brother Deacon.
And when Abraham was 90 years old and 9, the Lord appeared to Abraham and said unto him, I am the Almighty God.
Is that 17? Wait a minute.
17:1.
Verse 2. What does 2 say?
And I will make my covenant
Uh,
between me and thee, and will multiply thee exceedingly.
look at that. When he dealt with Noah, what does he do? What does he do? Establish what? What does he establish? Covenant. He established covenant. You got to write this in your notes. You cannot miss this. He establishes covenant without choice or without criteria. Meaning, you got to do this for me to do this. Are you with me? And I think here's where we've struggled. Here's where we struggle, especially in the family dynamic. Here's where we struggle. That we want to reciprocate or we want to receive whatever it is that we put out. We need to get that back or we're going to have disruption. Tell the truth. Tell the truth. Because we're human beings. Right? And therefore, when you don't get what you want, I don't get what I want, guess what we start doing? We start ripping at the contract because it's really not covenant. And we need to start telling people that we get connected to, tell them the truth. I ain't in covenant with you. It's a contract. Stop lying to folks. Tell them. I ain't in covenant. Because when you're in covenant, even when they don't do, your covenant has to remain intact. Well, Pastor Johnson, that makes you crazy. No, that makes you spiritual and that makes you mature, and it also makes you a person who understands growth. Before there can be a bilateral relationship, there has to be a unilateral relationship. Somebody has to establish it. And then somebody has to establish it based upon receiving nothing. What a challenge. What a challenge. And so I'm convinced that not only in families, but also in churches, which is why we cannot get to the place where we're needing to be. Because we operate our churches based upon contract. If you ain't doing this, we ain't doing this. We operate our homes based upon contract. If you ain't doing this, I ain't doing that. Right? There is no way that Davion can make a decision not to give that baby a bottle. Come on. That's neglect. And even if the baby won't stop doing whatever the baby doing, the baby don't know what the baby doing yet. But it becomes his responsibility to make sure the environment is conducive for growth, so that the baby can get where the baby needs to be. Our problem is that we want stuff to happen overnight, and we haven't even created an environment for growth. If there's no environment for growth, how in the world do you think the family system can be healthy? Because you have to go from covenant, unilateral, to growth. But you have to do covenant based upon your choice and not based upon criteria in what I'm going to get back. Good God Almighty. And so it's a challenge. It almost gives you, listen, it almost will make your head spin because you're like, Pastor, that's too hard for us to do. Well, that's why we ain't going to go to the next level. What becomes the priority? Your feelings or your ability to say, you know what, we're in this thing. And if you're immature, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to show you through my actions toward you what growth looks like. But if nobody dig around is willing to grow, guess what? Eventually, we back to the contractual state. And guess what our family systems have become? And that's why they're dysfunctional. They're contractual states. That's what has happened. If you don't do, I ain't doing. If you do that to me, guess what? Come on, let's be honest. Let's be honest. And based upon how I feel, right? If I don't feel like it, guess what? It ain't happening. And we try to figure out, well, why there's no growth in the home? Because it's not conducive for growth. It's only conducive for contracts. Why there's no maturity? Because it's only conducive for contract behavior. So nobody can grow because everybody trying to get their end of the bargain. Let's look at it again. Genesis chapter 9. Genesis chapter 9, right? Read it again. Now, and this time, Deacon Brown, I do want you to read 1 and 2. I'm making sure we were there, 17, 1 and 2. But just read Genesis chapter 9. What was that, 9 and 10? Mm-hmm. Read it again. Read it slow.
And I behold.
Oh, gosh.
And I behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you.
Look, I'm sorry. That's how you know, because I need you to get this in your head. I need you to get this. I need you to grasp this. If I'm establishing my covenant with you and your seed has not agreed to anything, it simply suggests that God is not expecting your seed to meet a certain criteria to have his covenant. Right? Because in order for the seed to be in covenant, somebody just got to establish the covenant. And if the covenant was based upon criteria, there's no way you can say to the seed, let's get in covenant, and the seed doesn't know what the criteria is. And so which suggests, and we have to conclude theologically and properly, that covenant is never based upon what your commitment or what you're able to do. It's just covenant. Say that with me. Covenant stands alone. Keep reading. And I got it right. I'm out of time. Keep reading.
And with every living creature that is with you, of the fowl, of the cattle, and of every beast of the earth with you, from all that go out of the ark to every beast of the earth.
Listen, so it goes beyond, it went beyond just human, right? The commitment to those living creatures. That I'm establishing this covenant. Supremely started by God. And perhaps the reason we're having the issues in our homes is because we have not established covenant in the home. Genesis 17, 1 and 2, and then I'm out of here.
And when Abraham was 90 years old and
99?
the Lord appeared to Abraham and said unto him, I am the Almighty God. Walk before me, and be thou perfect, and I will make my covenant between me and thee, and will multiply thee exceedingly.
Listen, because I want you to think about multiplying exceedingly, and we'll get into the dynamics of that. Because while covenant is not a criteria, it's not a criteria, there are benefits. There are benefits when you make the decision to be in the covenant. You benefit from it. He says, I'm here, I've established with you, but if you're going to benefit from it, now we take the next step. And we'll get into that next step. Covenant stands alone. Have we in our family system lived so many years by contract, and the system is broken, no growth is taking place, and we need to shift now to covenant? It's a question you got to ask yourself. My responsibility, coach you along to give you the information. you're going to make the decision how you're going to operate in your home. If you're content with broken relationships, keep the contractual behavior. But if you're ready to shift to a new place where growth can happen, covenant is definitely an option. Thank you so much for being a Hill Watcher. Grace and peace be multiplied on you. I'm sorry for holding you beyond our normal time. I'm excited about what God is going to do with this series on the family. Sister Johnson is coming with our announcements. I love you. And again, we look forward to seeing you on Sunday morning.
Pastor Johnson for that word on tonight. We certainly appreciate you. The Christian Education Ministry is inviting all to come out for a hot breakfast on Sunday, December the 5th from 9 a.m. to 9:45 a.m. Sunday school classes will begin promptly at 10 a.m. to 10:45 a.m. We hope to see you there. The Pastoral Care Ministry is preparing for the Johnson Family Christmas, which will be held on Sunday, December the 12th, 2021, immediately following worship. The assessment is $30 for each member, $50 for all leaders, and each ministry is asked to represent with a seat. Please see any member of PCM on Wednesdays and Sundays to give your seat. You can also use the layaway plan to give that assessment as well. There will be a drawing in the month of December, immediately following worship. Let's also paint the church on Sunday, December the 12th, with jerseys and jeans, or your favorite team shirt. Don't forget to wear your favorite sports team and let's worship together. The Baptist General State Convention Women's Retreat will be held on March 24th through 26th, 2022. To receive your registration and hotel information, please see me immediately following any worship service, or there are registration forms on the greeter station in the foyer of the church. To order Pastor Johnson's first book project, Looking Within, please go to lakivcjohnson.com, amazon.com, kobo.com, Barnes & Noble, or you can see me immediately following worship. These are your weekly announcements. Please govern yourselves accordingly and have an amazing Wednesday.